Imagine walking into a place you own, only to be treated like an intruder. Imagine being judged, dismissed, and humiliated, not because of what you've done, but because of what you look like. That's exactly what happened when Taryn, the new owner of a thriving car dealership, arrived unannounced. Within minutes, assumptions spiraled into confrontation, the police were called, and the truth shattered every mask in the room. This isn't just a story about a man buying cars. It's about power, prejudice, and the devastating cost of judgment. And once you hear how it ends, you'll never see respect the same way again. The late sun spilled golden streaks across the polished hoods of luxury cars at South Point Motors, the lot alive with the chatter of customers and the practiced charm of salesmen. Engines glistened like trophies beneath the fading light. To anyone watching, it was just another thriving day in the business of selling dreams on four wheels. But this day was different. From a modest sedan at the far edge of the lot, a tall black man stepped out. His presence was calm, deliberate. He wore a crisp white shirt, pressed dark trousers, and shoes polished enough to reflect the sinking sun. His movements carried quiet confidence, the kind that came not from wealth flaunted, but from self-assurance earned. His name was Taryn, and though no one around him knew it, Taryn wasn't there to buy a car. He already owned them all. The dealership, the building, the rows of gleaming machines, they belonged to him. He hadn't announced his visit. He didn't send emails or calls ahead of time. Instead, he came quietly, wanting to see how his staff operated when they thought no one was watching. He wanted the truth, raw, unfiltered, unpolished. As he walked toward the showroom, his pace unhurried, his gaze absorbed the details most people would miss. How employees greeted customers, how deals were struck, how the very spirit of the business thrived or faltered. His posture was relaxed, but behind his calm eyes, his mind was sharp, observant. The showroom doors opened to a wave of cool air, scented faintly with leather and fresh polish. Screens along the walls flashed. The latest models, salespeople darted between desks, juggling phone calls and walk-ins. The air hummed with energy, with commerce. Yet, when Taryn stepped inside, something subtle shifted. Conversations faltered for a split second. Eyes flickered his way. Curiosity? Maybe. Or was it something else? Then it happened. Her voice cut, through the noise like a blade. "Can I help you?" It wasn't welcoming. It wasn't warm. It carried the clipped tone of authority, brisk, sharp, and laced with suspicion. The voice belonged to Margaret, the dealership's manager. Dressed immaculately in a navy blazer and heels that struck the tile with precision, she was known for running the floor with military efficiency. Results were her obsession, and intimidation was her tool. To her, the man before her was not the owner she reported to, but just another stranger she'd sized up in seconds. Taryn turned to her with a polite smile. "Just browsing, thank you." But Margaret's eyes scanned him from head to toe, her expression tightening. Something about her look was not neutral. It was an evaluation, a judgment. She repeated his words back to him, flat, almost dismissive. "Browsing. Well, if you're looking for financing, we have staff for that. But unless you're actually serious about buying today, I'd prefer my team focus on real customers." The words landed like ice. Around them, the atmosphere shifted again. Salespeople stole glances, whispering in corners. The tension was invisible, to outsiders, but heavy enough that those inside could feel it pressing against the walls. Taryn didn't flinch. His eyes revealed only the faintest flicker of something deeper, but his voice stayed even. "I appreciate the information. I'd like to look around a bit more, if that's all right." Margaret's lips thinned into a line. Her tone sharpened further. "Just don't touch anything without asking first." Her heels snapped against the tile as she turned away, leaving Taryn in the silence of her wake. He continued moving through. The showroom, calm, observant, quietly making notes on his phone. But everywhere he walked, whispers followed. His presence unsettled them, not because he was loud, but because he wasn't. Soon, Margaret returned. Her arms were folded, her expression carved into irritation. Her voice carried the weight of accusation. "I've noticed you've been wandering for a while. If you're not planning to buy, I'll have to ask you to leave. We don't have time for distractions." Taryn looked up from the specks of an SUV, his composure unshaken. "I'm not distracting anyone. I have every right to be here." Her scoff was sharp. "I've seen this before. People pretending they're interested, wasting time, vanishing when it matters. We're running a business, not a lounge. So unless you're buying, you need to go." Taryn met her glare with unshakable calm. His voice lowered, even, steady. "I think you're making assumptions about me." Her irritation deepened into hostility. "And I think I know my job. Either prove you're serious, or I'll handle this my way." The air grew heavier. Conversations hushed. Employees watched but stayed still, caught between discomfort and fear of stepping out of line. It wasn't a scene of chaos, but of quiet, simmering tension, the kind that could erupt at any moment. Taryn tilted his head slightly, his voice calm, yet firm. "Handle it your way? What does that mean?" "It means my staff and customers deserve to feel comfortable," Margaret snapped. "And right now you're making people uncomfortable." His brow arched, the challenge in his voice undeniable. "Uncomfortable? Because I'm looking at cars? In a car dealership?" The remark struck like a spark to dry kindling. Margaret bristled, lowering her voice into a sharp whisper. "We've had enough people waste our time, asking for test drives, playing games. If you're not buying, you need to leave." For a moment, Taryn simply studied her. Then, almost imperceptibly, he smiled. A knowing, quiet smile that only fueled her anger. "I don't recall asking for a test drive. I'm just observing. Is that against your policy?" Her face flushed, but she pressed on. "You're disrupting my staff, and I won't allow it." Nearby, a young salesman froze, torn between stepping in and self-preservation. Margaret's glare silenced him instantly. No one dared cross her. Taryn's reply was calm, measured. "If you think I'm an issue, I'd be happy to speak to someone higher up." Margaret's laugh was dry, bitter. "Higher up? I am the manager. There's no one else to speak to." "Good to know," Taryn said, sliding his hands into his pockets. Her patience broke. Snatching up the nearest phone, she began dialing. Her words sliced through the room. "If you won't leave on your own, I'll have someone escort you. Out." "You're calling the police?" Taryn asked quietly. "Over someone looking at cars?" But Margaret didn't look at him. She gave the dispatcher her version of events, her voice authoritative, clipped. "Yes, there's a man here refusing to leave. He's becoming uncooperative." The weight of her words fell like a stone. Employees exchanged uneasy glances. A receptionist leaned toward a coworker, whispering, "Do you think she's overreacting?" The coworker shifted uncomfortably, eyes downcast. "Don't get involved." The stage was set, and the storm was only beginning. Taryn stood motionless, his calm gaze fixed on Margaret as she lowered the phone with a smug tilt of her chin. She had the look of someone convinced she'd won a victory. "The authorities will be here shortly," she said with cool finality. "I suggest you wait outside." Taryn's voice, even and steady, sliced through the growing tension. "Why would I wait outside? I haven't done anything wrong." Margaret's tone rose, sharp enough to silence nearby conversations. "You're trespassing. You were asked to leave. You refused. That's enough." The words echoed through the showroom just as an elderly couple walked in. Their cheerful conversation faltered the moment they saw the stiff standoff. Margaret, ever calculating, pasted on a brittle smile and motioned for a salesman to distract them. But the couple's eyes lingered on Taryn, uneasy, curious, sensing the storm brewing in the middle of the dealership. Taryn shifted slightly, pulling out his phone with unhurried ease. He scrolled through it casually, his calmness deliberate, his silence louder than Margaret's accusations. It only deepened her agitation. "You're not taking this seriously, are you?" she hissed, lowering her voice but keeping the venom. "Sharp!" He looked up at her, his gaze steady, unreadable. There was something in his eyes, a quiet defiance, maybe pity, maybe amusement. His words landed softly but struck hard. "I take respect seriously, but you don't seem to. And that's why we're standing here." Before she could retort, the glass doors swung open. 2 uniformed police officers stepped inside. The sight of them sent a ripple of silence across the showroom. Margaret straightened instantly, her chest puffing with relief and misplaced triumph. She gestured dramatically toward Taryn. "This is the man. He's been asked to leave multiple times. He refuses to cooperate." The taller officer, broad-shouldered with a firm jaw, exchanged a quick glance with his partner, shorter and sharper-eyed. Both men read the room, the stiffness in the air, the silent employees, Margaret's simmering hostility. Professional. Cautious, they approached Taryn. "Sir," the taller one began, his voice neutral, "we received a call about a disturbance. Can we speak with you for a moment?" "Of course," Taryn replied smoothly. He tucked his phone into his pocket, folded his hands together, and nodded. "I'd be happy to clarify." The stage was set for confrontation. Margaret stood nearby, arms crossed in satisfaction, while Taryn radiated an unsettling calm. Every employee watched, breath held. Even the elderly couple leaned forward, straining to catch every word. The officer's question came evenly. "Can you tell us what's going on here?" Taryn's polite smile didn't falter. "Absolutely, officer. I walked into this dealership to observe. I haven't asked for a test drive. I haven't disrupted any business. I've simply been looking around. Apparently, that's enough to warrant a call." Margaret's voice shot in, sharp and cutting. "You were asked to leave repeatedly, and you refused. That's why they're here." But the shorter officer raised his hand slightly toward her. "We'll handle this, ma'am." Then Taryn moved deliberately, one hand sliding into his pocket, his motion slow and transparent. "I don't want any confusion here," he said, calmly. He pulled out a slim leather wallet and from it, a folded piece of paper. He offered it to the taller officer. "This should clear things up." The officer unfolded it, eyes scanning. His brow furrowed, then lifted in surprise. He handed it to his partner, who read quickly before looking at Taryn, startled. "You're the shorter officer began. Taryn nodded once, his voice calm but carrying weight. "Yes, I'm the new owner of South Point Motors. I finalized the acquisition last week. Today I chose to visit unannounced, to see how things run on a normal day." The silence that fell was suffocating. Phones stopped ringing. Papers were left untouched. Every employee froze. Even the couple at the sales desk turned openly to watch. All eyes landed on Margaret, whose confident mask shattered into disbelief. Her voice came out strangled, barely above a whisper. "Wait, what? You're the owner?" Taryn didn't rush. He let the weight of his words settle like a stone in water. His gaze didn't waver. The taller officer cleared his throat, his posture shifting from authority to apology. "Sir, it seems there's been a misunderstanding. Unless you require us further, we'll step aside." Taryn inclined his head slightly. "No, officers. I appreciate your professionalism. Thank you for responding." The officers nodded, but before they left, one gave Margaret a pointed glance that cut sharper than words. The doors closed behind them, leaving a silence so heavy it was deafening. Margaret stood frozen, her face drained of color, her mouth opening and closing like a person grasping for air. Finally, she stammered, I didn't know. No one told me. We had a new owner." Taryn tilted his head, his voice calm but now edged with steel. "And that justifies the way you treated me? That excuses your assumptions? Tell me, Margaret, how many others have you humiliated because you thought they didn't belong?" Her composure collapsed. She looked away, her shoulders sagging, shame creeping across her face. Around them, employees remained still, unsure whether to move or melt into the walls. Taryn let the silence stretch, long enough to sting. Then he spoke again, his words low but unshakable. "I came today to see how this place operates. What I've seen is unacceptable, not just in how you treated me, but in the atmosphere you've created, one built on fear, judgment, and assumptions." Margaret's voice cracked, her once confident tone reduced to desperation. I was just trying to do my job. You thought wrong." Taryn cut in, his voice a controlled blade. "So wrong, you didn't even consider you. Might be mistaken. And now here we are." The words hit her like a hammer. She flinched, visibly recoiling. But Taryn wasn't finished. He turned his gaze outward, addressing everyone in the room, his voice firm and commanding, carried like a gavel striking. "Everyone here, listen carefully. I am the new owner of this dealership, and I believe in dignity, in respect, in treating people as people, not as assumptions, not as stereotypes. That's the standard I expect." Employees exchanged uneasy glances. Some looked relieved, others exposed. Margaret, however, seemed to shrink under the weight of his words. "You," Taryn said, pointing directly at her, his voice cold as stone. "I were supposed to lead this team. Instead, you set the worst example. You didn't just disrespect me. You disrespected this business, this staff, and every customer who's walked through these doors." The finality of his words lingered in the still air. The truth was undeniable, and Margaret had nowhere left to hide. Margaret's face flushed crimson, her once commanding presence unraveling into raw desperation. Her lips trembled as she tried to steady her voice. I've been here more than 10 years, she whispered. "I've always done what was best for the dealership." Taryn's gaze hardened, cutting through her words like steel. "Best for the dealership?" he asked, his tone sharp, unyielding. "You think calling the police on a man for browsing cars is what's best? Treating someone with contempt because they don't fit into the image you've built in your head?" Her shoulders sagged, the power draining from her. She suddenly looked smaller, fragile. "I'm sorry," she murmured, the words escaping, so softly they nearly disappeared in the silence. But Taryn didn't waver. His reply was cold, deliberate, final. "Sorry isn't enough. Not this time." The employees stood frozen, the silence heavy with expectation, each of them waiting to see what judgment would fall. Margaret's eyes widened in panic as she sensed the truth she had been trying to avoid. "Please," she begged, her voice trembling now. "I didn't know." "If I had known, you didn't know," Taryn interrupted, his voice like ice. "Because you didn't care to find out. That's the problem. And it's one I cannot overlook." Tears welled in Margaret's eyes, her polished facade crumbling. She shook her head, pleading, "I've given everything to this dealership. Don't let one mistake erase everything I've done." For a brief moment, Taryn's expression softened, but only for a moment. "This isn't about erasing your past," he said firmly. "It's about accountability. Choices have consequences, and you're facing them right now." The room was so still that the hum of the air conditioner seemed deafening. Margaret dabbed at her eyes, but she didn't argue further. Deep down, she already knew. Taryn finally turned to the watching staff, his voice calm yet commanding. "As of this moment, Margaret is no longer the manager of this dealership. I'll be overseeing operations personally until we find someone who actually represents the values we stand for." Gasps rippled through the room. Margaret's face collapsed into despair. "Please," she whispered one final time, but Taryn's decision was unshakable. Take this as a lesson, he said, his words steady, heavy with meaning. Assumptions destroy more than just moments. They destroy trust. They destroy respect. They destroy opportunity. Think about that as you walk forward. Margaret's heels echoed hollowly against the tile as she walked toward the door, her figure shrinking until she disappeared through the glass. Silence lingered in her absence, the air heavy with both shame and relief. Taryn stood in the center of it all, not as an accuser, but as a leader. His presence filled the room. He looked at the staff, not with anger, but with resolve. I know that was hard to watch, he said. And I know some of you are wondering what this means for your future. Let me be clear. This is not about tearing anyone down. It's about building something better, a place where every employee, every customer, is treated with dignity. And that starts today. The receptionist hesitated, then raised a hand nervously. Sir, if I may, some of us have seen things like this before, but we didn't think we could say anything. What do we do if it happens again? Taryn nodded, his tone shifting to warmth. You speak up, always, whether it's to me or to the new manager. Your voice matters. This isn't just my dealership anymore. It's ours. And together, we'll make it stronger. A ripple of relief passed through the room. Employees began nodding, posture relaxing. A fragile hope bloomed where fear once lingered. Taryn offered the faintest smile. Now, let's get back to what matters. We have customers here. Let's show them who we really are and give them the respect they deserve. The team slowly dispersed, the tension melting into something lighter. The dealership felt different now. Brighter. Cleaner. As Taryn prepared to leave, the elderly couple who had quietly witnessed everything approached. The man, dressed in a tweed jacket, extended his hand. Young man, he said with warmth, I don't know who you are, but you handled that with grace. It's good to see someone stand up for what's right. Taryn clasped his hand firmly, his smile genuine. Thank you. That means more than you know. As the couple walked away, Taryn allowed himself a breath of reflection. He hadn't expected a storm when he came that day, but maybe the storm had been necessary. Change is never easy, but it is always worth it. He turned once more to look at the staff, the showroom, the rows of cars gleaming under the lights. This was no longer just a dealership. This was his chance to build a legacy, one rooted in fairness, integrity, and respect. And with that, he walked out the doors, ready to shape a future where no one's worth would ever again be decided by prejudice or assumption. Stories like this remind us how dangerous assumptions can be. If this moved you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more untold truths that the world needs to hear.